Hello, friends, and welcome to the Bikes for Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I am your host. And on today's episode, we are going to honor a personal hero of mine and a pillar of the bikepacking community and even beyond, in his family and his community and the running community. Hal's presence has been felt and will continue to ripple through all of these communities and in our hearts for a long time. As many of you will know, 2 weeks ago I was scheduled to interview Hal again for the second time on the back porch of his Missouri home. And the morning I woke up to go visit with him, I wasn't feeling too hot, so I took a COVID test and tested positive. So I went back home to Texas, and the next week I had planned to drive back up and meet with him again. And we found out last Wednesday that Hal had passed away in his home, in his favorite chair, surrounded by loved ones. And I'll be honest, it's hard to know that I missed that opportunity. I know that we were both looking forward to meeting again, and I wanted so much to give him an opportunity to share some more stories and really anything that he wanted to share. I wanted to see him again. I knew that he had been battling cancer, and I am grateful that, towards the end, I was able to be in pretty constant contact with him, and whether it's through messages or phone calls, he always kept a positive attitude, a smile. He always was optimistic. I mean, even, the week, before he passed away, he was talking about maybe making a trip down to Texas to come and see me. So, he wrote a book called Touch Both Lines, and Hal touched both lines all the way to the end. He never stopped fighting. He never stopped trying. He never stopped inspiring all of us and being a positive example in our lives. And I think to honor Hal, today we'll focus on the happy times, just all the beautiful moments that he gave us. I was thinking about, Hal and his example, and I think one reason we all relate to him so well is because he was relatable. He, like all of us, had demons or ghosts and hurdles in his life that he had to overcome, that he struggled with. And I think the great service that he did to probably himself and people who were around him is that he wasn't shy to talk about it and share those things. And it wasn't to bring anyone down, but he always had a purpose. He always had a plan. He knew why he was on the Tour Divide. He knew why he started riding bikes. He always had his own purpose, and he knew who he was, and he knew what he was working through. And this was his process. And he always, no matter what was going on in his life, even fighting terminal cancer and ultimately succumbing to that and passing away, he never stopped being a powerful force of positivity and being an example and a light in this world. He never hemmed and hawed and dragged his head low and felt defeated. He always had a huge smile on his face, and he spread nothing but love and kindness, and he had nothing but love and kindness in his heart. And it's just a beautiful combination of knowing who you are, knowing what you need, having a plan, sticking to it, and spreading love and positivity, and just an absolute legend of an example for so many of us. If you followed his story, he didn't even pick up a bike until he was 57. And it wasn't long before he was competing in Leadville 100 and went on to ride the Tour Divide 6 times. His last time was in 2019, and he finished. Talking about touching both lines, Hal always said, I know two things. I'm going to start and I'm going to finish. I don't know what's going to happen in between, but I know that those two things are going to happen. And he did. He never quit anything. He put everything he had into it. Quitting wasn't an option. In fact, I remember now one of his quotes that really stuck with me was when he said that quitting is too easy. Quitting is the easiest thing you can do. He had a lot of simple life lessons like that, and I think that was part of his charm. Is he was in many ways just a regular guy that was relatable, that had simple solutions for maybe large or bigger problems. I think a lot of times we can overcomplicate things, but it seemed like Hal always just had a really simple and a beautiful way of looking at the world. And I think that simplicity, it made him very relatable. And those lessons that he taught us, both through his words and his actions, will, like I said, ripple through all of our hearts and through our communities for a very long time. So today's episode, we are going to pay tribute to this great man. I've put out a call for people in the community that knew him and wanted to share stories to send those in. And we got quite a few. Many of his very good friends sent in beautiful tributes. And I'll be honest, I cried through most of them. So the first part of today's episode is going to be those tributes to Hal. And then the last part is going to be segments from our first interview that I did with him. I believe it was June of 2019. It was right before he went to ride his final farewell Tour Divide in 2019. And we had a great chat. It was one of my fondest moments just in my life to get to sit down with somebody who I really look up to and have the honor of just listening to him and being in his presence. And I'll always cherish that. So I listened to that episode and picked out some of my favorite Hal moments, and I'm going to share those with you at the end of this podcast and have Hal close us out in his own way. But before we get to today's episode, there's no ads or anything like that, but I do want to share a few things as they pertain to Hal. First off, his funeral and visitation are this weekend. So Friday, January 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. is the visitation at Sheldon Goodrich Funeral Home in Osceola, Missouri. And the funeral is scheduled for Saturday, January 29th at 2 p.m. at First Baptist Church in Osceola. And I will put that information in the show notes so you can find that. I'm unfortunately not able to make it, but if you can, I'm sure that his family would appreciate that. Also, I want to share how you can acquire his book, Touch Both Lines. I read it in preparation for my second interview with him. And actually, he references this book in our first interview back in 2019, and he talks about how he probably never get around to writing it.
I'm trying to write a book, and I'd never probably get it done, but my idea is you touch both lines. That'd be the so-called name of my book. I believe that if you're an athlete and say a basketball player, the coach has you run back and forth and in practice, and you reach touch down, you touch the line.
I grew up playing tennis, and we touched the lines.
Yeah, and in most sports you have to do that in conditioning, but a lot of kids won't do that. The coach isn't looking. They won't. I've watched that lots of times. They won't touch both lines. But Dad taught me to touch both lines. He said, "You'll be as successful as you possibly can be
Well, in true touch both lines fashion, he did write the book, and mine is completely marked up. And man, I had so many questions and follow-up stories I wanted to hear from him. But, luckily he did leave this book for us. It can be purchased on Facebook. There's a Touch Both Lines Facebook page, and his son Dallas is the one who manages that and ships them out and stuff. So, be patient with them as they're obviously going through a hard time, but I know that they're eager to get Hal's story out to the world. So I'm going to also put that information in the show notes, or you can reach out to them via Facebook. And, one thing I was thinking about when I read this book is how great it would be if there was an audiobook version. I'm a huge audiobook fan. I have to travel a lot for work. Well, I don't have to, but for the podcast, I'm always driving, and I love audiobooks. When you ride, audiobooks are great companions, and I thought it would be really great to have this as an audiobook. And so I have offered to donate my time, my talents, and my recording equipment to that effort. The family has accepted, and so I'm excited. This is a real honor to read his book and do what I can to help continue to make sure that his story reaches as many people as possible. And I'm honored to have that opportunity. I've never read an audiobook before. It sounds like a big project, but it's one that I'm looking forward to. So no dates on when I can have that done. The editing will be the big challenge. So, but I wanted to share that. It's something I'm really excited about, and I'm excited to be able to continue to share his story and to elevate him and his example, and so it can continue to ripple. All right, one last note. My original episode with Hal was episode 14 when I was just a young podcaster. And I like to think we got a little bit better since then. And so one thing I'm going to be doing is going back over that episode and remastering it, so to speak, making sure the audio and everything is good and tightening it up a little bit. So we're working on that, and we should have a remastered episode 14 with Hal Russell available very soon. I'll post about that on social media if you're interested in listening to that one again, and I really recommend that you do, because I'm going to be including some of my favorite clips in today's tribute, but I think the whole episode is worth a listen. All right, everybody. Well, we're just going to get straight to the tributes. I want to thank everybody who took the time to send something in. I teared up on every single one of them. It's a difficult thing to try to express your feelings about somebody you cared about so greatly, and I just appreciate everybody for taking the time to express their gratitude and share their stories, so that we can know Hal better, and we can better understand how he impacted each of our lives. So first up, we're going to hear from Sofiane, then Marty Johnson, Bonnie Gagnon, Josh Kato, Shelia Reiter, and Billy Rice. And then we're going to hear some clips from my conversation with Hal back in June of 2019. Okay, Sofiane, the floor is yours.
So it was 2019, and after dropping out of the Tour Divide, I stayed in Brush Mountain Lodge for quite a bit of time. When I dropped out, I was actually leading the race, so it means that I got to see pretty much everyone that came through the Brush Mountain Lodge, and I got to meet pretty much every racer. And of course, one of the racers that came in was Hal, and I was absolutely stoked to meet him, because I mean he's such a legend, being the oldest still on the course, and oldest finisher, and it was this fifth time racing at that time. So obviously I went and shook his hand, and we chatted a little bit. And I mean, I'd stayed there for I don't know, probably a week, a bit more, and I'd noticed that the majority of the racers that came into the lodge, like in the afternoon or late in the afternoon, they would always stay. You know, they would always sit down, have a pizza, have a beer, chat with Kirstens and other racers, have a good time, and kind of press that reset button and be like, okay, this is halfway. I need to get some rest, have someone take care of me, having, you know, Kirsten be here and you know, watching your kid and having a good night's sleep and several good meals, you know, a good pizza, and then in the morning, good breakfast. So, I mean, after I would say maybe 30th, 40th place, pretty much everyone would just come here, get to the lodge, and then spend the night, and then get going the next day in the morning. I was pretty sure that Hal would do exactly the same, because it was late in the afternoon, and you know, it's a long way from Brush Mountain Lodge to Steamboat Spring. And so I was chatting with him. I was like, so what are you gonna do, Hal? You gonna stay here? And actually, no. He told me, no, I gotta get going. I have my schedule. It's too early to stop, and I'm just gonna keep going, and I'll camp somewhere between the top of the pass and Steamboat Springs. And I was stunned. I was like, wow, that's some discipline and some dedication that you actually rarely see when people came into what Kirsten likes to call the vortex, because it just sucks people in, because it's just so welcoming, and it's just such a great place to get yourself together before keeping going with the rest of the course. But yeah, Hal, no, it was just super focused. He just stayed there for I don't think he even stayed for an hour. He just got a little bit of food, said hello to everyone. Everyone was stoked to meet him or see him again. And he was wearing that T-shirt with a turtle on it, which said "I'm running." And yeah, so I shook his hand, and after, I don't know, not even an hour, he was back on his bike and back to climb Sand Mountain, and then he probably camped somewhere after this. And I was really amazed at this guy, and it's I gotta say, I mean, I was sad when I heard that he passed away, but you know, I think rather than sadness, what we should feel is that we had the privilege to meet such a guy, and to have such a role model. And you know, if I can ride the Tour Divide when I'm 70 and do it in 30 days, I'll be happy, and I'll be super proud. And I'd rather think of how full his life, how fully he lived it, and how awesome he was, and how many people he inspired. I'd rather think of this than think of the fact that he's gone. I mean, we all have to go at some point, but I mean, before he passed away, he just inspired so many people. So long, Hal. See you somewhere down the road.
Hey, Patrick, Marty Johnson from Wichita, Kansas, just calling in about some thoughts about our good friend Hal Russell. And, you know, first of all, man, I'm so fortunate to be able to have called him a friend. He was, you know, I feel sorry for those that didn't meet Hal or in the future won't have the opportunity to have met him or have ridden with him. They've missed out so much, and you know, it's easy to talk about someone when they're gone, but man, you know, watching on Facebook and all the comments about Hal. I mean, he really was the real deal and gained so much respect from people. And we talked about his smile and Smilin Hal. But, I'm fortunate to be able to have ridden with him and raced him. And, I first found out about Hal Russell. I had messaged J. Peter Very back, 13, 14, and asked about doing the divide. And I'm a little bit younger than Hal and didn't know about an old guy doing the divide. And JP mentions Hal Russell's done it a couple of times. So yeah, it's certainly doable. And so he was the inspiration for me. And like I say, I got to race him and ride with him. But, Hal didn't really want to ride with people. And, he was nice about that. But, he had other purposes for his riding. And of course, it was, to see the country, to meet the people, and also to solve some of his issues with Vietnam. And he had his memorial up there, up in Montana, that he'd stop at every year. But, he like I say, he just didn't want to ride with people. He would for a while, but he was always nice about it. But it was always fun racing him. And we're about the same speed, not real fast. And, 27, 28, 29-day finishers. We both had the goal of a 25-day finish. But, it was always fun racing him because I would maybe be a little faster than him, but I'd stop for the evening. And sure enough, that next morning, I'd look on track leaders and Hal's ahead of me. It's like, dadgummit. And then we'd meet up again and ride for a little bit. But, I think it was early on, maybe in 15, I remember seeing Hal post a picture of him going down Fleecer Ridge in the middle of the night. And it's like, if Hal Russell can do Fleecer Ridge at midnight, why am I stopping at 9 o'clock in the evening to rest? And so that's just how he did it. He knew two things, knew he was going to start and finish. And I think Hal really loved the in-between part of it. He loved the problem solving. Didn't run from those things on the route. He loved figuring that stuff out. I've read his book, and I told Hal after I read it, I said, Hal, I will always attempt to thank a vet for their service when I see him. I may not always do it, but after reading what you and so many of our military went through and still go through during war, is just something that I've got to thank them for, and how it's because of you that I can do that. But Hal's, there's very few people I can say is the salt of the earth, and one of them is certainly Hal. And so anyway, Patrick, thanks for the opportunity, and can't wait to listen to him. Have a good day. Bye.
Hey guys, Bonnie Gagnon here, and I just wanted to just share a quick story about how I met Hal Russell. He and I had been friends on Facebook because we both belonged to the Leadville 100 mountain bike race group. And I just remember thinking, this guy's like an icon of this race. So I reached out to him to ask some logistical questions. And that year, when I went to Leadville, there he was sitting like 1 or 2 rows in front of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's Hal Russell. Like, wow, he's a little bit older than I thought, wow, this is amazing. This guy's done this race, multiple times, so I was a little bit shy, but I introduced myself and, just got to know him a little bit better. And then over the years, he was just so gracious with information, and he was just really kind and encouraging. So at one point, I researched the Tour Divide and found out, that he had done the race already 3 times. And I didn't even know that because he was so humble and just really, kind of quiet about that. So I reached out to him again, and I was like, oh my gosh, you've done this race, can I pick your brain? And he was like, sure, what would you like to know? So for me, it was, just really asking him, what did it take to get through it? Like, where was your mindset at? And he's like, it's always just like stay in the spirit of the race. And, you just don't give up. I know I'm going to start and I know I'm going to finish. I just don't know what's going to happen between now and then. And I was like, wow, that's a perfect philosophy. So, eventually in 2019, I had the privilege and honor of sharing the race course with Hal. And I'll never forget the time that, it's like, I had set up camp at 1:30 in the morning, and, feeling kind of like, hardcore, I've been riding all this time. But at 3:30 in the morning, I hear a noise and I like open up my tent and there's Hal going by. I'm like, Hal? And he's like, good morning, Bonnie. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's already up and going. It was 3:30 in the morning. And I was just, wow, that's the kind of fortitude that I aspire to have, so we kind of like yo-yoed throughout the race, and I like watched what he did and how he resupplied and all that. And then he did confide in me about his health issues. And I just remember thinking, here's a man of like average stature, but he's got these just huge, shoulders of a giant because he's just shouldering so much and he's doing it with grace and strength, and, he didn't have that look on his face of, hey, I've got, all these terrible things that are happening to me. He always had, his traditional iconic smile, which just, automatically puts a smile on our face. So Hal, I just want you to know that you'll be so greatly missed. You already are. You'll always be a legend to so many people, myself included, and you'll always be so close and dear to my heart and in my thoughts. And, I just really look forward to seeing you again someday. Thanks for everything, Hal.
Hey, this is Josh. So Hal Russell. For me, Hal was and always will be the spirit of the divide for me. I had first learned about Hal back in, that would have been 2015, after trying in 2014 and following along that race as my wife finished up that year. Listening to the call-ins and whatnot, Hal's call-ins really kind of always stood out. His descriptions of the race and why he was out there, kind of just the story that was that followed along with him was kind of always intriguing. So after 2015, after riding that year, I contacted him and just kind of had correspondence with him and really let him know what how appreciative everyone was of his call-ins, and he was always showing to be an inspiration out there. That smile of his and the reasons why he was out there. He always said he was out there to meet the people, the great people, experience that, and to see all the beautiful things on the course, and then to work through his personal issues, namely with Vietnam. And we all have our reasons for being out there. We all have our goals that we chase. But for some reason, Hal just he always simplified that in terms of just that smile. But I think through that smile, you could always see there were sometimes some tears behind those eyes. There was a bit more than just the joy of being out there. It was kind of a lot of reasons for his riding it. And 6 times on the course, it's pretty amazing in itself. But to do it with such style and love that Hal did, I think is what kind of sets him apart out there. So the first time I ever met him was in person, was in 2016 in Banff. We were both going to line up again. Let's see, that would have been Hal's 4th year, my 3rd year on the starting line. And, as we were all running around Banff and getting things ready for the start of the race, I recognized him, and I met him and shook his hand, just kind of did the quick introduction thing. And it was pretty neat finally being able to meet this guy who I think my family and my parents were cheering him on more than me. And it was the following day. I was at the Y in Banff, and they'd kind of barricaded off one of the seating sections outside of their little cafe so that you kind of had to work through the cafe and get something to drink or eat there before you could get out to this outdoor seating. They had surrounded it by like fencing and a few flower planters out there, so you couldn't access it very easy. But it was pretty early in the morning, and I wanted to take a seat there. It was kind of one of the spots I usually sat in the previous years, and grabbed my maps and crawled over the planters and the fencing and took a seat just to look at the maps. And I was just sitting there, I noticed behind me a bit of a rustling over the planters, and I looked, and there's this guy crawling over the fencing and the planters, and it was Mike Hall. And it was the first time he and I had ever met in person. So he sat, and we chatted, made the introductions, and just kind of did the introduction thing. And as we sat there and we're laughing, telling stories, we heard some more rustling behind us, and we looked, and there's this other guy crawling over these planters and this fencing, and here pops up Hal Russell. Big old grin on his face. I think he had a couple of flowers from the planters still hanging off of him. And Mike Hall leans over to me, and he kind of whispers, is that Hal Russell? I leaned back over to him and said, yeah, it is. And Hal was super excited to meet us and be able to sit down and chat with us. And he mentioned something about how he really admired the elite racers and how he was impressed with this and that about our writing. And I think what Mike and I both kind of understood, because we sat there and mostly we just listened to Hal and we smiled because we were kind of in awe of this guy. There he is in his late 60s and already completed this race more than either one of us had. And it's like watching a professional sports hero and just kind of being in awe of them. And there was something about Hal, I think that it was the reason why he was out there. He realized it was a race. I think he always treated it as a race. But like so many of us, there's other purposes to being out there. And as we listened to Hal, I think we both appreciated his approach to the race, that the course itself, the race itself, can definitely be therapeutic out there. It's a comforting place. There's something about being out there for so long and alone that you can work through a lot of different issues and thoughts that you might be having out there. And I think that what most of us always remember about Hal is that great smile of his. And at the same time, I think that there's a lot that we can all learn from him. And he was one of those guys that you never really actually had to meet him in person, but just watching him and listening to some of his words, you could learn a lot from a guy like Hal just by watching him. So after that meeting with Mike Hall and Hal Russell, pretty top-notch meeting in my books. Hal and I kept in touch after that race and chatted back and forth a fair amount. Then our final meeting would have come in 2019. And again, in Banff, we hung out with all of our old Divide friends. And it's kind of a funny place because you become such close and lifelong friends with these people that you really don't spend that much time with. But I think there is that shared understanding of why we're all out there. And again, I think that Hal really embodied that whole reason, the people, the course, and then dealing with whatever issues you may have that you need to work through out there. I think that every year Hal did treat the event as a race. It was definitely kind of a personal experience as well, but for him it was a race, and he always tried to keep that racing mentality out there, trying to keep his dot within the allotted time frame to be a competitive rider out there. He did realize the importance of being out there. He always said that it was a place that he was trying to find a place to bury his ghosts out there. And while he had not really gotten rid of his ghosts, he told me, he had accepted them, and accepted that maybe that they were part of him. And he also said that the divide probably was part of him as well. He loved the adventure of it out there. He told me that it would make him feel alive. He felt at peace out there with his ghosts from Vietnam. And I think that really resonates with a lot of us, that it's a place of comfort out there. It's pretty wild and remote, and at times even maybe a little scary, but it's definitely where you're at peace. So in 2019, after parting away from Banff and working all of our separate ways down the course, I had encountered some problems that year. Ended up in the hospital and needed to get back home. So headed north. My brother had rented a car and come to get me, and he was driving me back home. And I'd spent a little bit of time at Brush Mountain Lodge seeing some of the racers and seeing some old friends there, and just kind of recouping from the effort that I'd gone through. I realized that Hal was a little bit further north than where I was, so unfortunately probably wasn't going to be able to see him. Kind of bummed about that. As my brother and I headed north, and we were zipping along the highway, I looked up and realized we were about to cross the divide route where we were, and my brother said, "Hey, there's a rider over there." And as we got closer, this rider that was kind of nearing the highway we were on, we both just looked at each other and said, "That's Hal." And just kind of this random meeting out of nowhere. We pulled off the road. I jumped out of the vehicle, and Hal wheels up and he looks at me and he stops, and his big old grin on his face, and he leans his bike down on the ground, and we just walked over to me and big old hug. And then it was at that point that smile kind of gave way to a whole lot of shared tears out there. And we exchanged some pretty special words between the two of us. It was his last year out on the route. He had kind of known that it was probably going to be his last year. He had some other health issues he was working through at the time. But as is the case out there on the divide, our tears kind of just disappear. And again, that smile and that laughter of friendship on the route came back. And John Schilling, another racer, he was nearby, came across, and so we got to spend a little bit of time there, the three of us chatting, having kind of a neat, random interaction out on the divide. And I think that Hal really brought out the best in the divide. It was his understanding that it was more than just a race. It's more than just a personal journey. It's everything kind of combined. And while that smile is kind of what we all remember, I think we can all see in that smile that there was so much more. Hal's going to be missed a lot in our community. And I know that his family and his close friends are all going to miss him so much. And yet we're all so much better off because we knew of this guy named Hal. Hal, you're going to be missed. But man, you gave us so much and you taught us so much just by being you. Thanks, Hal.
My name is Shelia Reiter, and I'm recording this from Austin, Texas. I want to talk about Hal Russell, a great human and cycling legend that we lost last week. Hal Russell and I had a little bit in common, that we both had lined up for the Tour Divide quite a number of times. I've lined up 5 times with one finish. Hal, of course, had a super impressive 6 out of 6 record. And something that was super interesting to me is that Hal and I actually rode at about the same pace, but he always finished way before me because he was so efficient and so steady. And he, of course, liked to drink Gatorade and eat junk food, which I just can't bring myself to do, but that does lend itself to an efficiency. I think it was 2019, Hal and his wife Linda came to Texas so Hal could race the Grand Gravel Fondo 500 that Billy Rice puts on in East Texas. And we got to ride with Hal quite a bit, trading back and forth. But he finished hours before us, of course, because, like I said, he's so incredibly efficient. But I was racing with my best friend, Shelia, and we arrived at the Stella Hotel, I don't know, 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and there was Hal in that empty parking lot. He'd been watching our dots, waited for us, took our picture, gave us a hug, and that just said so much to me about who he was. He was definitely focused on his finish and doing the best he could, but then taking the time to celebrate others, I thought, that just said so much about him. But there was another story I wanted to share, and this was the Tour Divide 2016. I had been riding with Hal, but somehow got ahead of him. And I was riding down this road, and I saw these two bears up ahead. And I stopped, and I blew my whistle, and I yelled, and did all the things you're supposed to do. And they just weren't moving. And I thought, well, Hal's behind me. I'll just go back and, I'll ride with him. So at least I'll have some company. And so I went back and I found him, and he was really excited about the bears. And instead of, grabbing his spray can and being prepared, he grabbed his camera. And so we continued on forward, and we got to where I could see the bears, and we kept moving forward and the bears weren't moving. And we finally got close enough to see that it was these two gigantic black culverts, big, steel pipe culverts that were staged on the side of the road for some construction project. And we laughed. It was pretty funny. But he didn't make fun of me. He didn't go, he never told anybody else that story, and I sure would have. He was a very good sport about it. Very good sport about it. But again, that's who Hal was. And, my thoughts out to Linda and to his family. He, it was quite obvious he loved his family. And, Linda was so supportive. She came to everything. I watched videos of the start of a couple of Tour Divides. You can see Linda in the background and, always there. And anyway, my thoughts out to the family, and Hal was amazing, and he will certainly be missed.
A fugitive pioneer headed to old Mexico. That's what Lena and I, that's what I called Hal Russell the entire year that Lena and I rode the tandem on the Divide. And how do you describe the energy that comes from a guy like Hal? Lena frequently reminded me that there were no fugitive pioneers headed to Mexico, and I was living in my own world. But man, talk about one of the most motivating guys that there is. When I think about going back to racing, which is just kind of not a reality for me at the moment where I'm at in my own professional life, it's not the going fast that I miss. It's not the doing well. It's not, man, it's the 30-second interactions with Hal and the guys like Hal. It's climbing Huckleberry Pass, slaving away on the tandem with Hal next to you, talking about the sunset and those interactions. When you're in the race environment, that line of racers that stretches across multiple states becomes this very odd living and breathing thing. And when you knew Hal was out there, it brought an energy to the whole route, which is very unusual. to sit and talk about specific instances with Hal is, I mean, Hal was bigger than that. The smile that everybody talks about was really just a symptom of the energy that he carried. And the legacy that he will leave on the racing environment and every racer that ever came across him, and probably multiple generations down of racers, is something that's really hard to describe. You know, I think it'll take me probably months to really dissect the impact that Hal had on the world and the things that he's left behind. He certainly left the world a better place than he found it. He certainly left the racing environment a better place than he found it. And I think what's so great is I don't think he set out to do that. I don't think he had any intention of doing that. I think he was just being who he is and what he was. And now we all get to sit around and kind of try to figure it out.
I had three reasons why I started doing these races, and first was to meet people, to see that humanity does exist, and then the second one was to discover the country. You know, you dream as a little kid, you dream of all that beautiful country, you dream of being a mountain man and all those sorts of things, and then you really get to see it. And then the third was I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I discovered that's the best way for me to kind of take care of my past and the ghosts, and, you know, keep myself halfway sane and so on. No, that's why I do the adventure races, because of Vietnam. You know, that's,
Yeah.
You know, some people will be out there, who are racing, or they want to race with, they want to ride with me and stuff. And you know, I hate to be rude, but not that I have agenda, but I'm not out there to beat you, but I am competitive. If you lag back or you go to sleep, I'm gonna pass you, you know.
Yeah.
But my main reason is, you know, those three reasons. I want to see the country. I want to meet people. Like one time, Billy Rice, somebody at his Indy asked him, "You ever stop and talk to people?" And he said, "No, but Hal does." And I do. I'll visit with you.
Yeah.
You know, might not tarry, but if you want to shake hands and visit, I'm all up. That's why I'm there, in a way. For me, it's minutes ago, seconds ago. I wasn't no war hero or nothing. I you know, I spent 5 months up at one place in the jungle up at Ankei in the highlands, and then I spent another 7 months down in central Vietnam in what's called the lowlands, in a kind of a field task force unit. But it just, you relive, you know, you relive it all the time at night, especially in nightmares and stuff. I used to it. I don't, but I do. I mean, it's
just something you'll live with.
Yeah, and that's what I finally figured out. I finally got help from the veterans. You don't realize anything's wrong with you. If you can call it something being wrong with you. And somebody said maybe you could go to the Veterans Administration and get some help. And so I did, and then they said, "Oh, you have what they call PTSD," and I didn't even know what that was. I asked not for your sympathy, only for your understanding. Because for once I stood for something, I stood for you. And I think that's what the veterans are, true veterans. That's, you know, that's why, you know, like you said, Memorial Day, they gave it their all. So, yeah. Anyway. We were there, and it was 6 o'clock in the evening, and this shotgun went off. And I seen some mountain bikers laying in the courtyard. Mm-hmm. And so I asked somebody, why'd they shoot a shotgun? You know, this old guy in a cowboy hat shot this shotgun off. And it was Ken Colbert's. And they said, that's a 100-mile mountain bike race, Leadville 100. And I thought, wow. And I looked at Linda. She, as usual, "You're not going to do that, are you?" And I didn't own a bike at the time. Well, I grew up riding bicycle, but I hadn't rode them. You know, we had old bikes, but nothing like what they had. But long story short, I come home, bought a mountain bike, and a couple years later, I actually entered the Silver Rush 50 at Leadville. It's a 50-mile race, and it's pretty tough, actually.
How much of like riding bikes and going on these adventures is just kind of getting away and getting into nature? Because obviously you grew up in a rural setting.
I'm a home out there. That's a home. People say they're scared out there. I'm not scared out there. I'm where I belong, just like here. And I'm not the dark. I like it to be dark. I'm safe in the dark. So
why do you feel that way?
I don't know. I always have. Dad. I think Dad taught me those things. Nobody can see in the dark. You're safe out there in the dark. And he's right. He was right. I came home one day and from school, teaching school, and Linda said, "Oh, I seen this documentary. You ought to watch it." I said, "Really?" "Yeah, and it's called Ride the Divide."
Oh no!
So I watched it, and she looked at me, and she knew. She knew. Yeah. So
well, it's her fault. She introduced it to you. So.
You have to understand each other. You have to give and take. I mean, that's what it's about. If you don't, I hope I understand her too, and see her side of things.
Well, 46 years?
46 years.
Doing pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah. I was in the dark. I'm getting in over my head, but that's the neat thing about it. Dad taught me that too. Just jump in, It's just like you learn to swim.
Yeah.
You got to jump in. So basically that's pretty much it. I bought through Sam up at Clinton, Sam Ball. He sold a bike called KHS, and I'd bought one to ride in the Leadville 100, a little 26er, and then but they started making a carbon, and I bought a 29 KHS, the Team Elite, and that was my first nice bike. That was a nice bike. When I did the Silver Rush 50, I probably had the first 29er around. I know I was the only one in the Leadville and the Silver Rush 50 on a 29er.
Wow, early
Somebody
adopter.
seen me on that bike as the Gary Fisher, and I said, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, I know. The guy at the bike shop said this is a new thing. You ought to buy one." And so anyway, I had that bike. My son still has that bike. I give it to my son.
Wow,
he
that's great.
Rides it now. And I just asked him the other day and about that, but. Each one's been an adventure. Like I said, I know two things. I know I'm going to start, and I know I'm going to finish. And of all the runs, I'm sure they did several hundred different types of runs, and I did quite a few bike races of different types. And so far, I finished every race. I might have drug in last, but I haven't quit any. Quitting's too easy. I learned that I quit a few things, 2 or 3 things in my lifetime, and that's a big mistake. And that's the easiest thing you can do is quit. So
right.
I'm sure one of these days something will happen, and I'll have to call it. And she said, "You're all by yourself." And I said, "Well, really, I'm not by myself." And I knew she knew what I meant. I was with my couple buddies I'd lost in Vietnam. And ironic thing, I started climbing up this pass called Temple Pass, or has another name, but you're going up to that pass. And all my memories come back and everything. I just let them kind of overflow me, so to speak. And I got up there, and it just everything got black like it was nighttime, but it was daylight. And a rainstorm, like no rain. I'm in the Continental Divide at the first divide crossing we had. And I crawled under a giant spruce tree and got under there to get out of the rainstorm. I was under there for 10 minutes or so, and then let up a little bit, and so I peeked out. I looked back the way I'd come from, and the sky was just dark black. And then I turned and looked the other way, and that's the way I needed to go, and the sun was shining. And I looked around, just wildflowers everywhere, beautiful place I'd never seen. And I thought, this is it. This is the place. And I found an old stump there, and I got a couple rocks, and I put them by that stump, and that was my so-called monument. I was going to bury my ghost right there. I hung around there a while, and it was just a beautiful place. And then you might say, I rode off in the sunset down the mountain.
So
I camped that night with the moon, looking out the moon in my little bivvy, and I remember everything. Everywhere I go, I seem to meet somebody, and people ask me, aren't you scared? And, like even on the Tour Divide or I'm out, do you carry a gun or a weapon? Or no, my weapon is my smile and my handshake, and I think that protects you as much as anything.
What's your personal biggest accomplishment on the bike? What are you most proud of?
Finishing the American Trail Race.
You want to describe that real quick? Because that's even a relatively new race. So
it
might
is.
be worth talking about a little bit.
My friend Billy Rice had, I seen where a year or two before it had, I think Neil Belachenko, I helped him formulate that race as well. But I'd heard about it and I thought, man, that's got to be a cool race. It's like the Tour Divide, only it's from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And nobody ever did it. And they didn't even know, what the trails would be like or anything. And that was
This
one
was
of the
17
deals.
or
It
16?
was in 2017.
Okay.
You're going to come to different areas that there might not be a trail there. But it's, and that's what happened. You'd have a purple line on your GPS. And he said, you're just, if you figure it out. And you would. One time, I don't know, I pushed my bike a long ways and just through the sagebrush and stuff. And there's no trail there.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a couple other bike tracks once in a while, but other people would blow their thing up and find a route around it. But I generally went through it, and we went across private land a couple of times. I never had good. Dylan Taylor, he won the race, and he was leading it, and he would find ways around it, and he'd send us how to get around it. But I didn't have connections. I didn't get his, taxes or nothing. So twice I went right through the private land. Nobody bothered me, but I went right on. I followed my line, went on through.
Yeah.
I got stopped once, and the guy told me how to. He said, you can't get through this place, but go up by this barbed wire fence and get through it and drag your bike under and go down along the fence. And I did what he said, and stayed pretty well on my line. A time or two I had to go around. There's no trail completely, and you had to deviate around. But when the desert was probably the hardest. I think when I got through Colorado, and that part of Colorado is tough. You got a couple of alpine climbs, and I got sick a few times. I got
altitude, or
I got altitude sickness in Colorado, but I overcame that in Lake City. And then my foot got infected. A toe got infected. I knew something was going wrong with it, and one night I was in Utah. I looked at my foot that night, and it was all infected and had kind of red lines up my leg, and so I was kind of scared. I was worried that, hey, I might have to go to the hospital. And I had 180 miles to go without any stops. But there was a place that was off route, only about 2 miles on a big interstate highway. And so I went over there. Well, long story short, I woke up in the morning, my foot was really bad. And I called Linda, and I had some...
About what mile was this into the race, just for
Oh,
reference?
probably 3,500.
Okay.
I was in Utah.
You were getting closer to the end.
Well, somebody told me
Close-ish.
when I got to Colorado, they said, you're about there. I said, I think my race is just starting. And it's Utah, Nevada, Oregon. That's going to test you.
So it goes east to west.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's going to test your ability. First thing, it averages 100 degrees every day, and up to 100. I think the highest I recorded is 112. But Oregon was the hottest, actually.
Well, that's fun.
But you just have no trees, no nothing in the desert, and that sun just beating down on you. It's unbelievable. And your water is almost boiling. It seems like, you're drinking hot Gatorade and hot water all of a sudden. And you're afraid that you can't run out. There's nobody out there. Nobody. There hadn't, besides the other bike riders. And all of a sudden, I think in Nevada, Utah or Nevada, Billy sent me a text and he said, now you're the you're the Lantern Rouge. You're the last one. There were two other guys behind me, and they DQ'd. They took another route. They had to quit. They said, and they did make it to the coast, but they went another route by the highways and so on. And so I said, okay. But
was that a good push, a good motivator? Well, you've never quit anything anyway,
I wasn't
so you didn't need any
no
more
way I was
motivation.
going to quit. But my foot, gave me I thought, wow, what am I going to do now? And I had this zithromycin for my antibiotic that I carry. I carry stuff with me, and so I took it, and Linda said she would call our nurse practitioner home and see what I should do. And she called me, and I was able to talk to her.
Oh, wow.
And she said, "You're probably all right, Hal. You probably need an antibiotic. When next town you get to, I probably need you to go to a pharmacy and get an antibiotic, like a penicillin antibiotic." Okay, but she said, "Send me a picture of your foot. You're probably okay." And I did, and I got a text right back. "You're not okay. You have blood poisoning running up my leg." So that's when I went off route 2 miles, and I went to this truck stop, big stop. And I went in and told the lady I'd had trouble, and there's a picnic grounds there with shade and everything. I asked the lady, "Is it okay?" And the nurse practitioner said, "You should ice that down and take a little bit of time off and take care of it." And so I got some ice in there, and the lady said, "I'll look out after you, the lady in the store." And I asked her, "Is it okay if I went out there and cabbaged one of those picnic tables and slept a little bit?" And yeah. So I iced my foot and everything. And my nurse practitioner said, "You need to put a pad of something on there and then tape it up." And so I did. All I had was Gorilla Tape, and I had some bandages, and I put that on there. Gorilla Taped my foot up, and I'd already cut my shoes. I did an X like that and slit my shoes open to take the pressure off, because I actually had trouble with both feet, but just infection in one. So I did that, and that helped a lot. And about 2 o'clock, it cooled off. It clouded up, and that's the first time it did that. And, well, I got on my bike and took off because I couldn't stay there. And I rode 80 miles, and late that night, I got close to Nevada. I was still in Utah. And when I woke up, I just camped out in the desert. And when I woke up the next morning, the pain was gone. Whoa, I caught a break here. The
penicillin kicked in.
I didn't have the penicillin yet. Okay. The zithromycin had kicked in. So it was a long next day. Linda had called ahead and said there's a pharmacy there in Ely, and that pharmacist could get me some medicine there. So that was my intent was to make it there, and that was a long, hot day. It was way over 100 degrees. It seemed like all day long. I was running out of water, but long story short, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I made it there. I got a motel, a little, there's gambling everywhere. It's Nevada. It's all about casinos and everything else on the dark side.
You can get married there too, real quick.
Yeah,
if you want.
Can do anything there. I noticed. But anyway, I stayed in this motel, and 5:30 in the morning, I seen I had a text from this pharmacist, and I called him. He said, "I want to know where he was. I could come. It's Sunday." He said, I'll be right over there. And he brought the penicillin pills to me and dropped them off to me. He said, "That's our job." He said, that's what we're supposed to do. So anyway, I got it and started taking them, and I got over that. I had some other injuries. I cut my knee open, and I needed to have it sewed up probably, but I just took strips and Gorilla Tape and taped it around there. And I stopped at another pharmacy and got some iodine. That cured it. But when I got there, when I finally did make it to the coast, that was unreal. I noticed the people, I say everybody, there's only 8 ahead of me. The only eight finishers. One of them was a tandem, so there's actually 9 riders. But 12 of us bike started and 8 finished. And
that's impressive for that race.
Yeah. But these were real people.
Good finish percentage.
There wasn't no rookies, so to speak,
right.
in the race. They were the real deal. And so even the ones that dropped out. they were real. They just
Yeah.
had reasons. They,
It happens.
Yeah. But anyway, I told you I like baseball. My idea, if you're a baseball fan or baseball player, the old one, if you were, I'm not, I never was very good, but I love baseball and I played as much as I ever could. And I'm mostly a bench setter, but I even coached baseball for years in high school and the little leagues and Babe Ruth and stuff. But if you do make it to the major leagues, they say you get your cup of coffee. That's the ultimate. If you just make it up there. And so when I finished, that's, my thinking was, as an endurance bicyclist, I got my cup of coffee. I might not really belong there, but I touched base.
Yeah.
I had that feeling.
That counted for you.
I just got, I'll never get on a podium or anything, but I got my cup of coffee in that race.
That's awesome.
And I still feel like I'm still getting to drink a cup of coffee once in a while when I finish the Tour Divide and stuff.
Where does that come from, though? Do you have any idea where that... Because when I was talking to Lael, she said that, just the thought of quitting just never enters your brain.
No, not...
Where does that come from? What is that?
I think my dad instilled that into me.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stories, and he related... I get off on tangent telling story, but...
Please do.
I like the outdoors. I coon hunted when I was a kid. Dad was a coon hunter and had hounds. And when Linda and I got married, we moved back to the farm. I wanted to buy a coon dog. She didn't know what a coon dog was. And so I got an old dog. And then this buddy of mine, he had some puppies. He said, I'll sell you a good puppy, good dog. And so I went out there, and they're just $25, he said. And I picked out the one I wanted, and he said, not for sale. And he said, I've sold them all but one. And I said, well, which one? He said, I can't find it. And they say he had 9. There were only 8 in the pen. And we looked outside the pen and crawled under, and there's this little runt, sick old coonhound there. He said, that's it. Oh, dang, it's about to die. So, that's it. And I said, well, okay. And I named him Willie, and I took him home and showed him to Dad. And I said, dang, this is a dog I bought. He said, no, don't worry about that. He said, the trick to that is... he said, you just let him be who he can be. There's no quitting a dog like that. And I remember him saying that. He said, just like you never quit anything. Just hang in there, and he'll be the best he can possibly be.
I'm glad you didn't beat me with shingles on top of everything else.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the Grand Gravel, because that's where I first met you, and we got it was great. I have great memories from that race, because obviously I knew who you were coming into it, and it was my first race, and we kind of leapfrogged each other quite a bit. It seemed. Do you remember that? It seemed like we were always
I remember it all.
Leapfrogging.
Yeah. One neat thing about the race is that you can have you might not, and for me, I might not be that competitive, but especially the Tour Divide, there's people in front of you and people behind you. And I like to think I'm always trying to catch those people within 50 or 100 miles in front of me, and I'm trying to stay ahead of the ones that distance behind me.
That's your race.
Yeah, and so you get to race. And the same way with the Grand Gravel. I wasn't in shape to do the Grand Gravel that year, but Billy, how you got to do it. And I'm not going to do it, but he kept edging me on. Come on, do it. And he said, he says he's not going to do it, but he really is. So I said, okay.
He goaded you into it.
He did, and I went down there, and no miles on me at all. But I did it, but you just happened to be the one that was around me.
I'm glad I was around you.
And then there are the 2 Sheilas, if you know Sheila.
I do, yeah.
The Sheilas, I call them number 1, number 2. And, I'm thinking I'm not going to let them beat me,
Mm-hmm.
But there were 2 or 3 others behind me. And Billy said, you're mid-pack. And so I passed you probably the second day. You were camped in your sleeping bag by this little building or something, a little shed.
Mm-hmm.
And I snuck by you. I didn't wake you up. But
you snuck by me the second time.
Well, you slipped by me. I was at a C-store, and I seen you go by me. You crossing a bridge, and was at some town. You went on by me. And So you were in a restaurant once the first day when I passed you, but then you went by me. And anyway, but I seen you go by me, and then somehow I got by you. I didn't know how I got by you that next to last day, but I'd got me a bunch of fried chicken at a place, and I'd stopped up in the mountain or in a
Yeah, you
park.
can't say mountains.
Yeah, it wasn't mountains. There wasn't no mountain. There wasn't even no hills and that
Yeah.
stuff. But anyway, I stopped there in I think some kind of national park, and I was leaning against a tree, and I seen your light coming, and you asked me how far I was going. I said I was getting ready to camp.
Yeah. So that was night 3.
Yeah.
It was about 350 miles in,
Yeah.
I think.
But I lied to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, and you said you were going to go camp, and so I let you go, get out of sight, and then I quietly come up behind you. I didn't know where you camped, but
I had a pretty stealth spot that night.
and so
Well, I've been wondering, I had to ask you about that because, I mean, that was the one thing, well, there was a lot of things that stood out from that race, but I remember that. And you passed me, I was like, I was trying to decide because there was about 150 miles left.
Yeah.
And we'd both probably put in a pretty good day already.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, it's that spot where it's kind of close, but it's also kind of far.
Yeah.
And I was really struggling with whether or not I was going to keep going or not. And I think you just put that in my head. You're like, oh, I think I'm just going to go a little ways and sleep. And mentally, I think I just kind of turned it off. And I'm ashamed to admit, but what it really came down to for me was that McDonald's that's in Navasota.
Oh, yeah.
I was starting to have a little bit of a rough time. And I was like, all right, if that's a 24-hour McDonald's, I'm going to keep going because I want an Egg McMuffin or whatever it was that I wanted. And it was closed. And so I wound up camping.
Yeah.
And then I woke up and I'm like, that old dog.
Yeah.
I love it though, man. I love it. It's all in the spirit of the race.
Got
man.
in about 9 that morning, I think, something like that.
Yeah. And I got in two that afternoon, and that's that sleep, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
I was chasing Marty Johnson and I are good friends, if you know Marty.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was chasing him, and he beat me once, and then if I beat him, it's usually because he fell out. He's a good rider. He's stronger than I am. But this year, and one time I was 100 miles behind him, but I just kept gaining, and this morning I woke up and I was probably 50, 60 miles behind him, and it started raining, getting in mud, and I thought, when they get up this, it's called something Hopewell Campground, I bet he'll stop there, and I just kept it coming, and sure enough, him and 3 or 4 other guys had stopped there. One of the guys' name was Paul and one Mark. There was 3 other guys. So I got there about midnight and pulled in there, and it was raining right down. And there's a little shelter there, and they're in it. And they got their bikes all cleaned up. They'd been there for a while and able to wash their bikes off. There's a water hydrant there and all that stuff. And it was really raining. I didn't want to wake them up. And so I went out. I carry a little tent, and I went out in the woods and camped, and I got up before it got daylight and got over that water hydrant trying to get that mud off, and I seen him wake up and come out, and Marty looked at me, and I smiled, and he shook his head, and I caught him, I thought, damn, I caught you guys. I'm sure I'm getting slower and I'm getting old and things are going downhill on me, but it's like Father Time's behind you. He's the one you're racing. So I don't think I'm ready to quit, or I'd like to think like some old mountain man would say, I'm going to go until I'm just lay down.
Right.
And I really believe that. I think, surely, it's just like an old truck. It'll finally wear out and stop, and I'll be that way sometime too. I know that, but
until then,
that piston breaks or something, I'm good to go. I got a lot yet to see. I still relate it back to people in wars. They're not out there, so we. And some reason that bullet didn't hit us or that car didn't run over, so whatever. We should keep it going. Yeah. My buddy Sam Ball taught me this, and he once told me, he said, Hal, he said, when we were born, we were all given our own space. He said, you might as well go out there and take up your part of it. And I believe that. And A lot of people don't do that.
Yeah.
We we were
It just
given,
kind of coast through life.
yeah,
instead
yeah.
of
And so there's adventure out there, there's things to do, and man, I sure I want my share.
Heck yeah.
I feel guilty for those. The best thing I can do for those that didn't get their share, so to speak, maybe I can see it for them.
We all have our personal heroes and idols and stuff, and you're certainly one of
Yeah.
mine. So I appreciate
Yeah.
you taking the time to share some of your story with me.
Thank you for visiting with me. I'm humbled that you would talk to me,
Oh,
ask
absolutely.
me questions.
Well, I've absolutely enjoyed it, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning into today's episode and this special tribute to a remarkable man and our friend Hal Russell. When I purchased this book, he inscribed in the front cover a message, and I thought I'd share it with you. It says, "Patrick, sometimes we are so afraid of dying, we are scared to live. To me, difficulties are just adventures. You figure it out as you go. Thank you for thinking of me. It means a lot. Touch both lines. Love, Hal." You touched both lines, my friend. Now ride in peace.